My parents left me in a parking lot to cheer up my sister who failed school, but my essay got them in trouble with child services. My family is a little, how should I say this? Crazy. Yeah, that's probably the right word. Because right now, I'm sitting in a quiet corner of the library, using the Wi-Fi and an old laptop, trying to figure out just how insane my parents really are. For context, I'm 17, a senior in high school, and I've always been the good kid. I actually like doing homework, reading, studying, all that nerdy stuff. My parents love to joke that I must have been born with a calculator in one hand and a pencil in the other. My sister, who's 15, is the complete opposite. She doesn't fail, exactly, but she's way more into sports, her friends, and TikTok than anything related to school. Usually, she coasts by with C's and just enough effort to get through. But this semester, things changed. I worked harder than ever before and ended up finishing first in my class, with perfect grades. My sister, on the other hand, failed 2 of her core subjects and had to take summer school. Naturally, I thought this was finally my moment. I imagined my parents would, I don't know, take me out to dinner, give me a pat on the back, or at least say good job. But nope, not even close. Instead, they decided my sister needed a confidence boost. Their brilliant solution? A week-long vacation in a lakeside cabin 3 hours away, which would have been fine, except they didn't invite me. To be clear, they deliberately left me behind. And here's the best part. They actually drove me halfway there, stopped in some random parking lot near a hiking trail, and told me to get out of the car. My mom's exact words were, "This builds character." She said it would help with one of my college essays. My dad chimed in, grinning. "Sleeping under the stars will be an adventure." Meanwhile, my sister sat in the back seat scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. At first, I thought they were kidding. I laughed and said, "Okay, funny joke, now let's go." But my mom just shoved my backpack into my hands, the one I had packed assuming I was going with them, and told me I'd thank her later. Then they drove away. I just stood there in shock, in the middle of nowhere, watching the car disappear down the road. I had no food other than a couple of granola bars, no cash besides a few dollars I'd tucked in my wallet, and no idea what to do next. So, I did what I always do. I solved the problem. I hiked down the trail for a while until I found a small clearing near the river. I unrolled my sweatshirt and used it as a pillow, lying back and staring at the sky. The stars looked like sharp, white lines cut into the darkness. And I thought, maybe this is what they meant by building character. Maybe this is the essay. See, I'd been struggling for months to write my college application essay. Every draft felt empty, like I had nothing interesting to say. But now here I was, abandoned in the woods by my own parents. So I started writing. I wrote about resilience, about watching the car drive away and realizing I was completely on my own. I wrote about how education had always been my anchor in a family that rewarded ignorance over effort. I poured every ounce of frustration into that draft. I didn't even stop to polish it. I just let it all spill out, raw and real. When I was done, I hiked back to the parking lot, walked about 2 miles until I reached a small town, and bought a bus ticket home with the few dollars I had. I got home before they even texted me. Not that they did. Not once. No, are you okay? No, did a bear eat you? Nothing. They came back from their vacation all tanned and relaxed, complaining about the traffic, while I was at the kitchen table editing my essay. My mom glanced at me and said, "Well, you survived, didn't you? That's the spirit." My dad laughed and added, "That's our little nerd." All I could think was, more material for my essay. A week later, one of my teachers encouraged me to submit it to a local youth writing contest. I didn't think much of it, but I sent it anyway. And then everything blew up. The essay won. Not just the contest. The local newspaper picked it up and published it as a feature story. Suddenly, people in town were talking. Teachers congratulated me. Neighbors called my parents asking if the story was true. And my parents? They lost it. They cornered me in the kitchen, furious. My mom yelled that I'd made them look like monsters, which, honestly, wasn't far from the truth. But it was too late. The story was out there. My name was printed right next to it. And here's the kicker. Someone from Child Protective Services reached out after reading it. That part wasn't exactly my intention, but I can't say it wasn't satisfying. So yeah, in a way, my essay turned into a little bit of revenge. Now there's an investigation, and my parents are pacing around the house like they're expecting the FBI to break down the door. Spoiler, I checked, FBI doesn't handle this stuff. But that panic in their eyes, that's something I'll never forget. In the end, they were right. It did build character. If it weren't for them, I never would have written an essay that powerful. And now they're getting their own taste of karma, from child services, the neighbors, and everyone who finally knows what they're really like. So yeah, Mom, Dad, looks like I'm the one building character now. You're welcome. Update 1. When I wrote my first post, my parents were pacing around like caged animals, waiting for Child Protective Services to show up at any moment. Honestly, I was a little scared for my own safety. No one had confirmed whether they'd been vaccinated for rabies, but even if they had, I wasn't going anywhere until I saw the consequences of their little character-building adventure. And oh, the consequences came, better than I could have hoped for. It all went down on a Thursday afternoon. My mom was in the kitchen, scrubbing the counters like her life depended on it. That's what she does when she's anxious. Some people stress eat. My mom stress cleans. My dad was sunk into his recliner, staring silently at the TV, like pretending nothing was wrong would make it so. My sister was scrolling through TikTok, totally detached from the chaos brewing around her. Then, the doorbell rang. I got up and opened the door. Standing there was a woman holding a clipboard and an ID badge. She introduced herself calmly but firmly, explaining that she was following up on a report concerning my safety. You could practically hear my mom's blood pressure spike. She rushed forward with a syrupy, high-pitched voice, insisting that everything was a misunderstanding, that I was fine, that everything was just fine. The CPS worker didn't flinch. She said that, regardless, she needed to speak with me privately. That one sentence sent my parents into panic mode. My dad tried to argue that there was no need, but she cut him off sharply. If you refuse, I can call the police and have this conversation with them instead. That shut them up. We sat down at the dining room table, just me and the CPS worker. My dad tried to pull up a chair, but she stopped him with a polite smile and told him this discussion was between me and her, so he might want to find something else to do. She asked me to describe exactly what happened the day my parents left me. I didn't need to dramatize anything. The facts alone sounded awful. I told her how they'd abandoned me in a parking lot, told me to sleep under the stars, left me with almost no food and barely any cash, and then drove off. I explained how I walked to the next town and bought a bus ticket home. Then she asked if I felt unsafe living there. I told her the truth. My parents don't hit me, but they don't protect me either. They belittle me, mock me, and somehow think neglect is a twisted form of teaching resilience. She wrote everything down slowly, nodding as she listened. Then she asked if I had anyone outside the home who supported me. That was the first time I felt the tightness in my chest start to ease. I told her about my teachers, my school counselor, and my boss at the tutoring center where I work on weekends. I gave her names. She looked relieved to know I had a safety net. Before leaving, she handed me her card and told me to call if I ever felt unsafe again. Then she went to speak with my parents. I didn't hear every word, but judging from the shouting and frantic hand gestures, it wasn't a pleasant conversation. My mom kept insisting that it was just a creative parenting technique. My dad argued that I was never in real danger and that I was smart enough to handle myself. At one point, my mom even said I was exaggerating everything for attention, which only made the worker's tone even firmer. I caught a few lines of what she said. Neglect is not an educational method. It doesn't matter how intelligent he is, you are still responsible for his safety. When the CPS worker finally left, my parents looked like they had spent the night sleeping under the stars. They told me I should have kept my mouth shut, but didn't say much else. They also made it clear they didn't want me talking to her again. I told them technically, I hadn't talked, I had written, and I tapped my temple to remind them I'd done it thoughtfully. The next day, my English teacher asked to speak with me after class. She had read the newspaper article and told me she was proud of me. Then she said she'd sent my essay to a friend of hers who works in college admissions at a local university. Apparently, they were impressed. She said I might even get interest from other schools beyond the ones I'd already applied to. I hadn't thought about that before, but it couldn't hurt to have more options in case the others didn't accept me. Later in the cafeteria, a couple of classmates I barely knew came up to me. They said they'd read the story too, and one of them told me it resonated with him because his parents were a lot like mine. Meanwhile, back at home, my parents were unraveling. My mom ranted about the neighbors whispering behind her back, and my dad grumbled about coworkers making jokes. One night, my mom cornered me in the hallway. She said I needed to write a follow-up essay to clarify that the whole thing had been dramatized, that I should present it as creative writing. I told her no. She snapped her fingers at me and said I had to because I'm your mother and you have to listen to me. I asked if she wanted the CPS worker to listen too, because if so, we could call her right now. Her threats ended right there. My dad tried a softer approach. He sat me down and said he knew I didn't mean for things to go this far, but if Child Protective Services kept investigating, it could ruin all of us. He suggested I just keep quiet and not poke the bear. I told him that nothing about this was ruining me, so he didn't need to speak on behalf of everyone. At the tutoring center, my boss pulled me aside. She'd read the article too. She told me that if I ever needed a place to stay, I could use her guest room anytime. She also offered to write me a glowing letter of recommendation. My mom tried to ground me, but I ignored her. I'm 17. I work. I'm applying to colleges. She can't treat me like I'm 10 anymore. My dad has gone quiet, nursing his bruised ego with beers in his recliner. Yesterday, Child Protective Services called me directly. They wanted to check in and said they'd be making another visit soon. When I told my parents, my mom's face twisted like she'd bitten into something sour, maybe her own pride. I still don't understand why I'm the only one in this family actually building character. Funny, isn't it? They tried to teach me that lesson, and now it's their turn. It might not be in the middle of the woods, but Child Protective Services looks just as scary, maybe even more. Update 2. Child Protective Services came back, this time with 2 workers instead of 1. Double the karma, I guess. They separated us again. Me at the dining table, my parents in the living room. The new worker, a man, asked sharper, more pointed questions. What does a normal day look like at home? Who makes sure you have food? Do you feel like you can talk to your parents when something's wrong? I told the truth. I won't repeat every single thing we discussed, but you can imagine what my life is like with parents who did what mine did. Then he asked the big question, would I like to stay here? I answered that I wanted stability, at least until I could leave for college, whether that stability came from this house or somewhere else. I didn't say outright that I wanted to be removed, since I was close to leaving anyway, but I wasn't sure foster care would be the best option either. While my parents put on their best concerned moms and dads act in the next room, I overheard fragments. Opie's birthday is coming up. We should arrange something big since it might be the last one at home. Stuff they said to make themselves look good. At one point my mom even said loudly, like she was talking to a coworker on a construction site, that she loved my creativity in writing, which made the worker pause mid-note. After CPS left that visit, my parents called a family meeting. Translation: there would be no birthday party and they definitely didn't love my writing. Their plan was to put me back in line, so to speak. They sat me down and started damage control. My mom said she'd been thinking, and maybe they'd misjudged how their actions looked. My dad added that outsiders don't understand our family dynamic and like to twist things. I sat there with my arms crossed. My mom asked me to call Child Protective Services and tell them I knew they loved me and had never doubted it. My dad finished with the classic line, "We're only trying to do our best." I asked if they wanted me to call then or later to tell CPS I was being extorted by my parents. That was the end of the meeting. To give you an idea of how wide my essay spread, this is a small town. Even the cashier at the grocery store asked how I was doing. Parents of kids at my school shot sympathetic smiles as they dropped off or picked up their children. It felt surreal. For me, the attention was mostly positive. For my parents, it was humiliation. They started avoiding neighbors, skipping social events, even missing church because people looked at them funny. One night my mom barged into my room and accused me of ruining her social life. She said her friends didn't want to be around her because I'd made her look like a bad mother. My sister finally broke her silence. She cornered me in the hallway one night and said she hadn't asked for any of this. She hated that I'd written the essay because now everyone saw her as the spoiled one. I had no answer for that. She is the spoiled child in the worst way. This wasn't about a bigger birthday party. This was literally abandoning your other child to save money on the cabin. Apparently, my parents discovered that taking 2 kids instead of 1 would be $50 more per night. So they left me there to figure it out and save money. My counselor called me after class and asked to meet. She said if things at home got worse, she could connect me with resources. The past weekend, CPS showed up again while my parents were arguing. The worker opened the door right as my mom was yelling. She wasn't going to wait for them to finish. My dad told my mom to calm down when he saw the worker enter. It was chaos. The worker didn't blink when she asked me to pack a bag and go with her that night. It was meant to be a temporary placement to give everyone space. I grabbed my backpack and left. That night, I stayed with a host family 2 towns over. Luckily, they were kind, normal, calm people. Sitting at their table eating spaghetti, I realized that's how a home is supposed to feel. The next day, my parents called and accused me of playing the victim for sympathy. My mom was angry at CPS for taking me, and my dad muttered about government overreach, claiming they steal kids. I had another meeting with my parents, CPS, 2 workers again, this time a case manager and a uniformed officer. The meeting was to lay everything out. The case manager started by summarizing what they'd found so far: negligence, emotional abuse, an unstable environment. She was blunt about the parking lot night. Leaving a minor like that wasn't building resilience. It was abandonment. My mom yelled that the whole thing was overblown and called my essay creative exaggeration. The officer shut that down quickly, pointing out that it wasn't just words. They had my first-hand testimony, the bus ticket receipt I bought, and confirmations from people who'd seen me left there. That's when my dad tried to soften things by blaming cultural misunderstandings and different parenting styles. The case manager leaned forward and said, "I've seen too many negligent parents to be told a story like that and not act. If this were a cartoon, he'd be deflated by now." She turned to me and asked whether I wanted to stay here or prefer an alternative placement until I turned 18. I said, "I'd rather be somewhere else." My mom completely lost it. She stood up and started yelling about how I'd embarrassed her, ruined her reputation, ruined her life, everything. She called me ungrateful, selfish, dramatic, right in front of CPS. The officer stepped between us and told her to sit down, saying he was authorized to use force if necessary. My dad grabbed her arm and whispered for her to stop, which only made her slap him, because apparently she felt he hadn't defended her. It was chaos. Then my sister started sobbing, and not for me, for herself. She said she was sick of being compared to me, that she hated being the failure, and that she never asked to be dragged into this. My mom tried to console her, saying we needed to stay united as a family, but my sister pushed her away and shouted that staying united is what got us into this mess. It was the first time my sister spoke up, and she chose the worst possible moment for my parents because she said it in front of these people. CPS took me back to the foster home. After we left, things at home exploded. I know this because my sister told me later. My mom turned on my dad, screaming that he hadn't defended her. She also turned on my sister, accusing her of betraying the family. Meanwhile, my parents' social circle shrank. My mom's best friend told her she couldn't stay friends any longer. My dad's co-workers mocked him about CPS, and he came home angrier than usual. My sister says they're going crazy, sometimes even aggressive, but at least not toward her. CPS is continuing the case, so they can't lay a hand on me for now. Still, they slam doors, pound walls, and shout all the time. I told my sister to record video or audio of everything she could and to call 911 or me if she ever felt afraid. Update 3. I never thought I'd write this much about one night in a parking lot, but here we are. The dust has finally settled, and I think it's time to start looking forward instead of back. 2 weeks after my last update, Child Protective Services came back to my parents' house, this time with official paperwork. The caseworker explained that after reviewing everything, they decided the house was not a safe or stable environment. The papers were for temporary guardianship. I'd be living with a foster family until I turned 18, unless I preferred to stay with a trusted family friend. With that, my move became permanent, no longer a few-day arrangement. I think my parents had convinced themselves CPS was bluffing all along, that it was just a scare tactic, that they'd get a slap on the wrist, and everything would go back to normal. When they realized it was real, that I was legally leaving the house, all hell broke loose. My mom screamed that they couldn't do this, that it was kidnapping, that I was using the system to destroy them. My dad stood up like he was ready to argue, but the officer reminded him the court had already approved it, and that wasting his breath would only make things worse. If he resisted, he'd be arrested, which would bury their case even deeper. So my mom kept yelling while my dad sank back down, just like always. Truth be told, I like living with my foster family. They're an older couple a few towns away, kind, gentle people who actually care about how my day went. Their house smells like cinnamon. They have 2 lazy dogs and keep a plate of cookies on the counter, which is probably where that smell comes from. Not great for my waistline. I might end up showing up to college with a cinnamon cookie belly before ever tasting a beer. But honestly, I feel more cared for and loved here than I ever did with my own parents. People like my boss at the tutoring center have helped however they can. Small things here and there to make this transition smoother so my college applications wouldn't suffer. I don't think I'll ever stop being grateful for that. The local paper even ran a follow-up article. And no, I'm not sharing the link. I don't want people figuring out who I really am. This time it wasn't just my essay. It was a full feature on parental neglect, complete with photos of my parents that, let's just say, didn't do them any favors. They became the talk of the town. My dad started missing work, calling in sick, more than usual. My mom barely left the house except for necessities. My sister kept me updated on how things were going. I guess that was her way of keeping some kind of connection. Even she started spending more nights at friends' houses than her own. I found out later that CPS had permanently flagged their file. They'll be monitored for years, especially since my sister's still a minor. My mom blames me for bringing the government into our lives. I blame her for leaving me in a parking lot. I'd say that's a fair tie. Surprisingly, my sister and I have actually been talking more since I left. We've been messaging back and forth, and she admitted she hated all the pressure they put on her. We're not suddenly best friends, but for the first time it feels like we're on the same side instead of against each other. The last time I saw my mom was rough. She showed up at a CPS meeting trying to defend herself. She claimed I had twisted everything, that I was a manipulative storyteller, that none of what I said was true, just a spoiled brat lying to make himself look good. Well, if I'm a spoiled brat, who exactly do we blame for that? None of her defenses worked. The investigation into my sister is still ongoing. There's nothing as extreme as leaving her stranded in the woods, but they're keeping a close eye on things. As for me, I've started getting acceptance letters from colleges. I'm in the middle of deciding where to go next year. I've received partial scholarships, so I'll need student loans and probably a part-time job to cover the rest. But honestly, that sounds like a vacation compared to living with my parents. Update 4. It's been a while since my last post, and a lot has changed. I'm now fully settled at the university I ended up choosing. It wasn't my first choice, but it came with the biggest partial scholarship, which means I can study without drowning in debt. It's not a bad school at all, just not the one I would have picked if money hadn't been an issue. Then again, with my parents, money was always going to be an issue, whether they abandoned me or not. I'll admit, I felt a little guilty leaving my foster parents behind. In just a few months, I grew more attached to them than I ever did to my biological parents in my entire life. Honestly, if the night they abandoned me I had met a werewolf, I'd probably feel a stronger emotional bond with him than I ever did with my own parents. Still, I stay in touch with my foster family. I've promised to come back for the holidays, and maybe even visit some weekends once I figure out what exactly I'm doing here. Everything feels new: classes, work, study sessions. I'm just taking things as they come. My parents, on the other hand, are learning what it means to be parents without children. They still call themselves that, but they were terrible at it even when we actually lived with them. My sister's no longer under their care. CPS removed her and placed her with my foster parents, at my recommendation, until I can find a way to bring her to live with me. She can't stay in my dorm, and renting an apartment near campus would be expensive, but I'll figure something out. As for what exactly happened that led CPS to remove my sister, let's just say it's right on brand for my parents. Apparently, they wanted her to write an essay about how great they were, something that could rival mine. I don't mean to sound arrogant, but if you remember, I'm the nerd, not her. Writing essays isn't her thing. And besides, she refused to do it. They wanted her to talk about all the good things they had done for her over the years, which basically meant they wanted her to lie. Sure, they were a little better with her than they were with me, but not by much. What were they expecting her to write? Some dramatic story about how they pulled her from the rubble of a collapsing building while rescuing a kitten at the same time. They needed a redemption arc strong enough to repair their public image, but she wouldn't give it to them. She said no, repeatedly, until they told her, either you write it, or you'll find out what happens. She chose the you'll find out. What followed was 3 days locked in her bedroom. No leaving, not even for the bathroom. By that time, CPS had actually slowed down their investigation, since they hadn't found enough recent evidence to justify continuing. But my sister didn't wait for the full 3 days. About 6 hours in, she escaped. She didn't call me because she didn't want me to worry, which is ridiculous. She could have called CPS or anyone. For context, her room is on the same floor mine used to be. My parents' room is downstairs. Around 10 at night, she tried climbing out of her window onto the roof, but it was dark. She slipped, rolled, and fell into the front yard. My parents didn't hear a thing since their room is on the other side of the house, but a neighbor saw it happen. He helped her, called 911, and made sure she got to the hospital. Thankfully, she was fine, just a few scratches and a nasty scare. But of course, the fall was reported to Child Protective Services, and with my parents already having a thick file because of me, that was the final straw. You can probably guess the outcome. My sister was placed with my old foster family, and now I'm trying to get her here with me. She's still going to the same school for now, since my foster parents, being the kind, retired angels they are, drive her every morning and pick her up in the afternoon. If she moves in with me, she'll have to transfer schools, but she's actually okay with that idea. My parents, meanwhile, are facing criminal charges. Apparently, locking a teenager in a room for 3 days with no bathroom and possibly no food is considered a bit worse than leaving your kid in the woods near imaginary werewolves. Speaking of which, those werewolves might actually be friendlier than my parents. They'd probably offer you a game of basketball on a makeshift court deep in the forest before ever locking you up. Anyway, I'm planning to return to town to testify when the trial begins. My statement will be taken into account. I didn't expect to write this much again, but I guess I had a lot to get off my chest, including the part about the werewolves. Update 5. Since so many people have been asking me the same question in comments and private messages, I'll start by answering that one first. No, my sister isn't living with me. Not because I didn't want her to. In fact, I was already working on getting my own apartment so she could move in with me. But in the end, she chose to stay with our foster parents. She got really attached to them, which honestly doesn't surprise me, and the idea of leaving her friends and everything familiar behind would have been too hard for her. They were completely fine with her decision. Actually, they insisted she stay, which just gives me one more reason to visit them and her. As for my biological parents, they finally faced consequences for the charges against them. For child neglect, they were fined around $2,000 and ordered to attend mandatory parenting classes. Still, my sister had the choice of whether she wanted to return to live with them after that or not. Once they completed their requirements, CPS asked for her decision. And she said, and I quote, she wouldn't go back even if they paid her to. Can't really blame her. Cinnamon cookies have a certain charm that's hard to walk away from. We know our parents have moved out, though. The old family house, the one we all grew up in, was up for sale for a while, and then someone else bought it. No one really knows where they went after that. They basically packed everything up in the middle of the night and disappeared. It doesn't surprise me. My mom can find work pretty much anywhere. She's adaptable. My dad, on the other hand, had a job tied to something very specific in our hometown. I won't say what, because it would make it too easy to figure out where we're from, but I do wonder what he's doing now. Then again, that curiosity isn't strong enough to make me actually want to find out. Unless my parents somehow end up being chosen as test animals to be launched into space, and it makes national headlines. I think this is where my story ends. M.